3 words that have appeared in a presidential speech, in the lyrics of some of the most listened to music in the world, in the titles of books, in the arguments of politicians, in the fears of millions of people, and in the jokes of people who think those fears are absurd. New World Order. The phrase exists. That is not the debate. The debate is what it means, who is saying it, whether the people saying it are describing something real, something imagined, or something in between. And that debate, more than the phrase itself, is what this video is actually about. Here's what they didn't tell you about the New World Order. On September 11th, 1990, President George H.W. Bush stood before a joint session of Congress and said this: "Out of these troubled times, a new world order can emerge, a new era, freer from the threat of terror, stronger in the pursuit of justice, and more secure in the quest for peace." He used the phrase again in a speech the following year, and several times after that. It was not a slip. It was a deliberate framing of a post-Cold War international vision in which the United States, freed from the constraints of superpower rivalry, could help organize global cooperation toward shared goals. That is the political origin of the modern use of the phrase. A sitting president of the United States, speaking in a formal address to Congress, describing a new phase of international relations. Pause for a second. Bush was not the first to use it. The phrase has appeared in political and intellectual discourse throughout the 20th century, used by different people in different contexts to describe different visions of how the world might be organized. H.G. Wells used it as the title of a 1940 book. Woodrow Wilson gestured at similar ideas when proposing the League of Nations. The phrase has never belonged to one movement or one ideology. It has been a container into which different people have poured different meanings. What happened in the 1990s as the Cold War ended and globalization accelerated was that the phrase moved from political language into cultural consciousness. And in that move, it picked up something it had not carried before. It became associated with a specific theory, that the new international order being built was not just cooperation, that it was something more coordinated, more intentional, and less visible than the public version suggested. When artists reference control, systems, or hidden power, are they describing reality or just reflecting the world people already feel? That question does not resolve easily, and the reason it does not resolve is that both possibilities are simultaneously plausible. In the decades following the Cold War, themes of control, hidden influence, and institutional distrust moved from the margins of culture to its center. Artists across genres began weaving these themes into their work in ways that generated enormous popular response. Eminem's music contained references to feeling surveilled, manipulated, and trapped inside systems that did not operate as advertised. Kanye West's work, at various points in his career, engaged directly with themes of corporate control, media manipulation, and the gap between what public figures say and what they know. Jay-Z's lyrics have generated entire cottage industries of interpretation around symbols, affiliations, and references that some listeners read as metaphor and others read as something else. And this is where people start to disagree. The interpretation question is genuinely complicated. When a major artist uses certain imagery or references in their work, there are at least 3 distinct explanations available. 1, the artist is making deliberate choices to signal something to a specific audience. 2, the artist is drawing on cultural vocabulary that has become widely available and using it as creative material without specific intent. 3, the audience is finding patterns in the work that reflect their own pre-existing frameworks rather than anything the artist specifically intended. All 3 of those explanations are consistent with what is actually observable in the material, which is why the argument does not resolve, which is why it generates so much engagement, and which is why the argument itself, rather than any conclusion, is the point of the debate. Now look at this. The factual substrate beneath the cultural debate is real and does not require any specific theory to be taken seriously. Globalization is documented. The expansion of international institutions, from the World Trade Organization to the International Monetary Fund to the Bank for International Settlements, is documented. The increasing integration of global financial systems, communication networks, and regulatory frameworks is documented. These are not hypothetical trends. They are measurable realities that have accelerated significantly since the 1990s. The question they raise is one of interpretation rather than fact. Is the increasing interconnectedness of global systems the natural output of technological development and economic incentive, or does it reflect coordinated direction by actors who benefit from that interconnectedness in ways that are not fully transparent to the populations affected by it? If culture keeps repeating the same themes, is it because something is being signaled, or because people are all reacting to the same reality, that question is not answerable in the way that a factual claim is answerable, because it is a question about the relationship between social reality and cultural expression, and that relationship is genuinely complex. Artists respond to the world they inhabit. The world they inhabit includes real increases in institutional power, real decreases in individual economic security, real evidence that institutions have operated in ways not consistent with their public self-presentation. The channel you're watching right now has spent 16 videos documenting exactly that. So when artists make work that reflects skepticism of institutions, distrust of official narratives, and awareness of the gap between what is said publicly and what happens privately, they may be drawing on personal experience, on cultural vocabulary, on creative instinct, or on something more specific. The observable evidence does not distinguish between those possibilities in a way that settles the argument, and this is where it gets controversial. Some listeners and analysts have gone further than noting themes and argued that specific symbols, specific phrases, and specific associations appearing across different artists represent coordinated messaging rather than coincidence. The recurring appearance of certain imagery, the affiliations of certain executives and institutions within the music industry, the relationship between what becomes commercially successful and what themes that commercial success carries. These arguments range from careful pattern analysis to speculation that goes well beyond what the evidence supports, and that range is part of why the debate is so persistent. The careful version of the argument is hard to dismiss entirely, the speculative version is easy to mock, and the two versions exist in the same conversation, making it difficult to engage with the underlying question without being associated with the most extreme articulation of it. Now think about that. That dynamic in which a legitimate question gets entangled with extreme claims in ways that make the legitimate question harder to ask is not specific to the New World Order debate. It appears everywhere that institutional skepticism and pattern recognition intersect, and it is, as this channel has tried to document, a feature of how certain conversations get managed in public discourse. The phrase New World Order is polarizing in a specific way. People who hear it and dismiss it entirely miss something. People who hear it and accept the most elaborate versions of what it implies also miss something. What sits between those two positions is a genuine question about power, coordination, and the relationship between what is visible and what is not in the organization of global systems. That question is not answered by the phrase, but the phrase keeps pointing at it, because at that point, the interesting thing is not whether the New World Order is real in any specific conspiratorial sense. The interesting thing is that the phrase and the idea it carries keeps surfacing in politics, in music, in culture, and in conversation, across decades, across contexts, across very different kinds of people with very different agendas. And here's the reframe. The New World Order is not a single confirmed thing. It is a phrase used by presidents to describe a geopolitical vision. It is a concept used by artists to describe something they feel in the culture. It is an idea used by researchers to describe patterns in global institutional development. And it is an accusation used by people who believe that the coordination happening in those global systems is less transparent and less benign than the official description suggests. All of those uses are real. They exist simultaneously, and the fact that they all attach to the same three words is itself something worth examining, because those three words produce something specific wherever they appear. They produce a conversation about who is in control, how much the public actually knows, and whether the world being built around us is being built with us or without us. That conversation has been running for 30 years. It is not resolved. And the people who want to resolve it in either direction tend to miss what makes it interesting. So here's the question worth sitting with. If an idea keeps appearing in politics, in music, in culture, and in how people interpret the world around them, does it matter whether it is real in any specific provable sense? Or does it matter more that millions of people think it might be? Because if an idea shapes how people understand institutions, how they respond to information, and what they are willing to believe about the world they live in, then the idea is having real effects, regardless of whether it is true. Tell me in the comments what you think, because that question does not have one answer, and that is exactly what makes it worth asking.